Um, Ironically, talking about chins, we are talking all about the body today. You probably looked at that and seen it on the YouTube chat and been like, what on earth are you on, Becky? How is this going to help me live my life? Um, and I was thinking about the hot topics for next year and how many things that we're going to be looking at that we live counterculturally about, how many things that we live differently to how everybody else does. And so you know what I'm like. I always want to know why. Why is my big question? Because I'm like, you can't tell me what to do. I want to know why I'm doing it. A bit like kind of like the worst toddler ever when you tell them not to put your hand on a hot stove and toddler's like, I'm going to do it anyway, unless you tell me why not to. Or I'm going to do it and then I'll realise. So what we're going to look at is this topic. A lot of this talk is actually based off of this book. Would highly recommend giving it a read if you have some time. If you want to borrow it off me, feel free. So this is What Does God Have to Say About Our Bodies by Sam Allberry. And he does a very good job of talking about this, and I've stolen a lot of stuff from him. But yeah, a lot of this talk is from here, and a lot of this sort of ties together all of this stuff that we're going to be looking at to do with all of these different ways that we live counterculturally. And so if we want to know how to live well as a Christian, then really it all comes down to what we think about our bodies and what God has to say about them. For example, like me speaking right now, I wouldn't be able to speak if I didn't have lips, a tongue, teeth, hands, vocal cords, a brain. All of this stuff is integral to work out what I'm saying. And most of the time it's absolute nonsense because dyslexic brain. But everything that we do is because of our bodies, what we use our bodies for. So we're going to have two sections, one before food and one after food. One is why our bodies matter, and then the second one is how this should motivate us with what we choose to do with it, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So first, oh yeah, you know what would help is if I remembered that I did a PowerPoint for this. So the first section we're going to look at is why our bodies matter. So you've got 3 questions on there. What is our body? What does the world say? What about other religions? I want you to should we just go boys and girls? Seeing as there's 6 of us. Should we just, okay, if we split off into 2 groups and have a chat about those in groups. So what's our body? What does the world say? What about the religions? If we have 2-minute chat about that. Well, I don't know about you. There's probably lots of different stuff that you were talking about just then. And I think there's probably a lot of different answers. People have a lot of different opinions based off of their culture, based off of how they grow up, how they deal with their body. But I mean, probably most people would be like, that it's just this thing that we happen to move around in. But also there's this element of wanting to be seen, like how we present ourselves is really important, like whether or not what we're wearing, what tattoos we have, what piercings we have, what makeup we're wearing or not wearing, what size we are, if we're tall or short or big or small. So I want you to do something really brutal, and I'm going to stand over here for this. If the world is looking at me, what does it see? So I want you to think about being as honest as possible to each other. Don't talk to me because I might cry. What do you think that society sees when they look at me? You guys have opinions when you look at me because you know what I'm like, but somebody meeting me for the first time might think something completely different. Has anybody seen, I think is it 8 out of 10 cats? Would I lie to you? That's what it is. You know when they get like a random stranger up, and then you've got to like try and work out who's got the thing and whose weird relation or stranger story that is associated with them. Yeah, exactly. But like, girls, please. But I think really, when we're looking and walking around a day-to-day life, we make a lot of assumptions based off of what somebody looks like, and so. Yeah, we often use that to determine how we interact with them, or perhaps how we don't interact with them. And a lot of religions might also see the body as kind of unspiritual, or kind of like it leads to temptation. It's the body that does things, so it's not the mind. Our spiritual higher power means that we're actually above it. We're trying to escape it, or perhaps there's shame in what our body does or looks like, that it needs covering in certain parts, like with Judaism is in the head, as the girls were talking about. Other religions, it's sometimes the whole body that needs covering. That's how shameful the body is in other cultures. So, What does God say, though? So, here's some questions for you to discuss in your small groups. What does God say? Does he approve of our body? How is this reflected in what he says and does? And how are we made? Leaders, please don't share, because we're going to cover it. Otherwise you're spoiling the rest of my talk. This is a quote from C.S. Lewis that basically says that Christianity is almost the only worldview that thoroughly approves of the body, because we are created to have a perfect body in the image of God, and because God takes on a human body through Jesus, and also that we're going to have a body in heaven is what we find out. So I thought we'd run through a little bit about the body, a bit of body theology, which sounds very fancy, isn't really. So what we see through the Bible as we read it is that the body is a gift. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's more. It's one of these things that when you think about it, you're like, oh, there can't be that much in the Bible about it. Oh, wait, there is. Exactly. So we find out that the body is a gift. Do you know what bit of us was created first? Just the whole of our body was the first thing that God created, and then he breathes life into us. So it is a trick question. God, I didn't realize there would be so much offense. So all the way through the Bible, from those first moments when God creates Adam's body, then breathes life into him in Genesis 2:7, and then Eve from Adam's rib, he starts with the body. The body is an integral part of who we are. And then obviously, I don't know if you've noticed, girls, but everybody since then has had a body. And in heaven, we still have a body. If we have a look at Matthew or in Revelation 21, when we're going to be walking around Heaven City, we're told about the bodies that we have here are going to be transformed in Philippians as well. But why does it matter that this is a gift? Why am I supposed to care? Why should you be listening to me? Well, that means that it's precious, surely, if it's a gift. Why is our body precious? So, why is it precious? Well, first of all, it means, I've just run, again, I've forgotten why my PowerPoint exists. It means that we are handmade. So, as we see in Genesis and in the Psalms as well, that we're knitted together in our womb, that God has made us personally, that we are handmade by him. And that makes it all the more precious, surely. So, one of my favourite presents that I got for my 23rd birthday was this little scrapbook. And as you can see, it's not really that exciting. It's just a couple of pieces of cardboard with some paper stuck on it. But this is a gift from Sarah and Grace, and it's got little pictures of me making stupid faces and our friendship from over the years that we've known each other. And maybe there's probably better things that I could save if there was a fire at my house, like maybe my laptop's quite important. But one of the things that I probably want to save is this, because it's full of memories that I won't get back. This is handmade by them, and I'm never going to be able to replicate it, even if you try and sat painstakingly and was like, right, I've got this exact wallpaper, I can do it all like this. You're never going to be able to recreate it in a different way. It's precious to me because my friends spent time during lockdown making me a scrapbook of memories. And I think it's even more precious when we know something's handmade, when we know the person who's made it. And because we know what God is like, because he's good and loving and kind, I think it makes it even more precious. Because this is from my best friends, this makes it even more precious to me. Because if it was just from somebody that I didn't really know very well, I'd probably be like, why do you have so many photos of me? That's a bit weird. So we are precious because we're handmade. What else? Well, we're also made with a purpose. So God had really good intentions when he made our bodies. He wanted them to do good things to bring us and him joy. Here's a question for you. Is it on here? Yes. What purposes has God called us to, and what commandments did he give the whole of humanity? So I wonder if you can name the things that God's given all of humanity to do, what he tells all of us to do. What about anything back in, 10 Commandments. What about anything back in Genesis? Yeah, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and rule over it. Also in Genesis, which is probably not one that you've thought of, is to work the land and to care for it. But in order to make things grow, in order to have plants thrive, they need human interaction to help with them a lot of the time. Because like my aloe vera plant was not very happy until I cut all the brown leaves off it and repotted it into a bigger plant pot. So we've got a gift that's handmade and with a purpose. Also, it's made personally. If the body is not accidental, if don't you go, whoops, here you go, have a body, then that means it's not incidental. It must have significance. There must be a reason that we are here. There must be a significance to having a body. Something that is really important. This is the body that you are supposed to have. You have your body for a reason. And that means that there's differences in what we look like. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but we don't all look the same. Shocking. But I wonder, is there a hierarchy of the body? Is there a more image of God version? Are Adam and Eve better than us, do you think? Because they're more in his image than we are, because they're the first made. Yeah? We're all made equally. So basically, does it matter like who's tallest and who's shortest? No, but to God, does it matter? Yeah, no, it doesn't matter. The only requirement that God has to love us and to love our bodies is to be a human who's made in the image of God, and that's all of us. So no matter what we look like or what we hope we'd look like instead, doesn't mean that God loves us any less or any more than somebody else. Well, that's all well and good. Very nice, very nice. But I don't know if you've noticed, but it doesn't always feel that way. And the girls were alluding to this in what we were talking about. We were saying that, but it doesn't quite feel like right, because it's broken. It's a broken gift. How is it a broken gift? Why is it broken? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so that means that we're subject to the elements. So if you're anything like me, you've been really suffering with hay fever recently, or I don't know, I sunburn really easily as well, like all of the pale skin. But maybe also there's things that are more seriously wrong with us. Like I've got a weird blood thing. I've got dyslexia. I've got various forms of allergies. That my body isn't how God wanted it to be like when he first created us. There's suffering as well associated with that. Lots of people who have chronic illnesses, people who are disabled. Like God meant our bodies to be moving around. Their bodies are just as important as anybody else's, but that's not how God had intended stuff when it first began, because he wanted us to be able to move, to be able to not suffer, to be able to enjoy life. And also, it needs to be redeemed. We have to be bought by Jesus. That's what it is to be redeemed. Yeah, bought back by Jesus. Thank you. Yes. But all of these things, we're broken because we're all subject to sin, and to the sin in the world and the sin in us. And we look forward to a time when there's no longer pain, there's no longer suffering in our bodies, when we're pure and holy and we no longer do things that we shouldn't do, as we see in Revelation. But this is all well and good. But if it's broken, and we can look forward to a time where there's going to be better, and we're going to have a body that's no longer with all of these things. But what can we do now? What am I doing with my body now? Like, why does this matter? Why am I telling you about the body? Well, because it's a gift, we should be motivated to respond, which is why we are going to look different to the rest of culture, which is why we're going to, because we know what the blueprint is. We know what God started off with when he looked at Adam and Eve before it was broken, and we look forward to returning that blueprint in heaven. So there's a different way that we're going to behave with our bodies because of what we know about it. Considering all that I've just said about our bodies and how much of a gift they are, how should we respond now? What should we be doing with our bodies? Right, so there's a few things that how we should respond. So I think I've got 3 little subtitles and then some discussion-y bits for you guys to do. But you will need some Bibles. My answer to the question is, how did that change? How should we respond? Well, I think we should respond, first of all, with thanksgiving. And this isn't always easy because, yeah, there's terrible memes once again, strike. And responding with thanksgiving actually isn't always easy because our bodies don't always reflect what God intended. And it might be hard to thank God when we feel hindered by our bodies physically. But we are fearfully and wonderfully made, so surely that means that it's wonderful, but it is broken. And so a part of us in turning away from him, that's sin, that's shoving off God, I'm in charge, girls. That's shoving off God, I'm in charge, no to your ways, acronym of sin. All that ways of shoving stuff off, actually, and some of the ways of doing that is in not thanking God for things. And a part of us in sinning, actually, is not thanking God when we should. So that verse in the Bible from Romans says that basically they didn't glorify him as who he is, and they didn't give him thanks for what he's given to them. And that's part of our sinful natures. So we should respond with thanksgiving. Second of all, we should respond by being physically there. Sounds a bit weird, right? But as we see through a lot of Paul's letters in the New Testament, Paul is desperate to be with these people that he's writing letters to. We see this in 1 Thessalonians as well. He's like, I really want to be with you guys in person because it's so much better to be with you. Why is Paul sad? Yeah, what? But he's so desperate to be there with the people that he's writing to. And it's the same with us. I mean, do you guys remember all back in lockdown when we all had to spend time on Zoom and we were all like, I just can't wait for this to be over. And then I don't have to try and do Minecraft on Zoom with all of you guys. I just want to be with you guys doing youth group in purpose. There were certain parts of it that were fun, but I think we all missed spending time together in person. Because there's something different, there's something wonderful. Like, when one of you isn't at youth group that week, you all feel a bit like, this is not how our bodies are supposed to be. We're supposed to be together. We're supposed to be in person. We're supposed to be doing things outside together or inside together. And we're going to have a little bit more of a look at this when we look at social media in the new year, hopefully. And then I think thirdly, so we've had Thanksgiving, and by being physically there, by coming along to stuff, be that church or youth group or spending time with your friends. But I think thirdly, the body is a temple. I'll have it, yeah. I think thirdly, we should respond by thinking about how our body is a temple. So that verse has been thrown around as we've been chatting. What does it actually mean that our body is a temple? So what was the temple used for in the Old Testament? And then what happened to the temple just before the New Testament? What? Praying? Yeah. And what did John say about where God was in location to the temple? Yeah. So it's where God was. Does anyone know where he was specifically in the temple? Mm-hmm. Yes. It's called something beginning with H. The Holy of Holies, exactly. You guys know that I've told you before. There was a whole big curtain that was like really, really thick that the priest could go through one time a year to be where God was, where the Ark of the Covenant was. And do you remember I said that he had to have a rope tied around his waist? Because, if he died in there, because if he did something he wasn't supposed to, no one else could go in there without dying, so it'd just be like really smelly. So they had to have a rope in case he died, so they could just yank him out again. Because no one else could be in there. That's how holy God is. And that's, we come into the temple to worship God in the Old Testament. But what about what happened in the New Testament or just before the New Testament? We've alluded to this already, but what becomes the temple in the New Testament? Like that, if the temple is destroyed, if the curtain is ripped in two, so God is in us. So like the Old Testament temple where he's in this Holy of Holies, the Holy Spirit, God himself, is in us. So we become the temple. And so what does that mean about where we can worship God? this is all very well and nice and fluffy and very helpful theology, but give me specifics, right? We need to work out what this actually means for practical living everyday life. What we look at and what we spend our time doing, so what we watch and read. So this is the first example. So what do you think that God's going to say about what we look at or what we spend our time doing? Yeah, so the things that we look at, like, I'm not saying that all you have to do is look at the Bible, but the things that we should be looking at should be lifting us up and be drawing us closer to God in some ways, even if that's just watching a good film that you know that's been created by a wonderful human who's also been created. And whatever we do, so like we don't have to be sitting there praying every single second of every day, but if everything we do, even if that's from walking to the bus stop or from, I don't know, sitting and doing an exam or chilling out and watching TV, if we're doing that in glory to God, if we're doing that in the way that glorifies him and is pleasing to him, then all of that is worship. Worship isn't just us standing up on a Sunday singing a song. The way that we live our lives should be worship too. Okay, well, clearly you're all finished. So, who looked at fashion? It does sound a bit cringe. But yeah, it's talking about that it doesn't matter what we look at on the outside, and we shouldn't search to, like, make ourselves look pretty on the outside, because that's not what God looks at. And I'm not saying we can't look pretty, but I think it's all about where our head's at, if we know what God is judging us on. It's not on, I don't know, if we're in the top 500 hottest people in the world list. Yeah. What about exercise? What was God saying about exercise? It was talking about how it is good to train your body and to look after it, but it's not the biggest thing. What about food? There's some stuff about, like, in the New Testament about Peter being like whether or not he eats clean things or unclean things, and Paul basically tells him off and is like, hun. I always say hun, I don't know why. Right, this is always the Becky translation of the Bible. But Paul tells Peter off and is like, you know that God's made everything clean, so why are you worrying about what you're eating and drinking just because of other people judging you? Would recommend giving that a look up when you get home if you want to have a think more about that. What about tattoos? This is probably a bit more of a juicy one. So I did a bit of research and listened to a whole sermon on this topic, and this guy went through all the different ways that tattoo is talking about in the Bible. So that Leviticus passage that I put up there, could anyone take a guess at what that says about tattoos? Especially in that context, the pagans in this time were doing these things when, like, to, like, honor the dead, or like when someone was dead. Like, it's all just like association with, like, honoring somebody and worshipping somebody when they're dead by marking on their body different stuff. 1 Kings is another Bible verse which I didn't put on there, which is talking about how the blood comes out when you're making a tattoo, if you're doing a tattoo, I guess. And blood often was used as a way to, like, sacrifice and offer to false gods. So that's also a way that tattooing wasn't really very helpful back for the Israelites. And then Jeremiah, it basically tells them off, one of the prophets, Jeremiah, because the Israelites have started doing all of this. And Jeremiah's like, you're not like this. You don't worship other gods. You don't, like, why are you behaving like they do? This doesn't make any sense. And also then you get the bits in Leviticus that talk about blood being unclean and blood being the life force and how people shouldn't be eating it. And then we get to Genesis. So God put a permanent mark on Cain's physical body that he was to be protected, basically, that no one could hurt him. But then also, if we think about other forms of cutting in the Bible, what cutting was perhaps normalized or even promoted back in the Bible? Circumcision, exactly. And also piercings. So there's nothing in the Bible against piercings, actually, but in those times, it was sort of like in slavery to mark that you belong to the master. So if you're pierced somewhere, then it means that you are a slave. Well, that's what it did mean back those in context. I mean, I say this having 6 piercings in my ears. And I think also it's very clear that the Old Testament law isn't intending for all people or all times, because it's talking to a specific context of people at the time when they needed to be marked up as holy, as different. And there's some stuff about, like, the food laws, which Nathan looked at, that means that it's not about what's clean and unclean anymore, because Jesus covered that. He's made a way for that to be not a thing that we're bothered by, because that's not how we get to heaven. And so the guy that I was listening to when he was talking about this was saying, like, we can substitute a lot of other these things. So some people might have different views about what we wear or even tattoos. And I think that we have to be aware that if we're doing things that are causing our brother and sister to stumble, or if we're causing them to, like, feel distress, then if we're supposed to be honouring and loving each other, then should we really be doing those things? If you know that you're going to dinner with a vegetarian and they're really anti-meat, maybe one of the kind things that you could do for them, the loving ways of doing things, according to Romans 14, is maybe just to not eat meat for that meal with them. And perhaps it's the same with tattoos, that if you want to get one, I think there's some things that you probably shouldn't be putting on your body, and that kind of is obvious. And some people might have different convictions about whether or not you should get tattoos. But if you're going to get one, I think it should be something that is going to be helpful and God-honouring to you and your body, that reflects to the rest of the world, like something good and God-worthy. I'm not saying that you have to get, like, I don't know, a Bible verse tattooed on you, but I think it should be something that you want to have on your body, that you want other people to see, that means something more important. But also, maybe if you know that someone else is going to be offended by that, maybe get it on an area of your body that you can cover up, so that you're not going to cause them to stumble or sin or to feel upset, because, you know, I don't think that's kind. That was very speedy. Does that kind of make some sort of sense? Yeah, great. I think also what's worth thinking about when you're thinking about tattoos, a lot of it's all about what our identity is in. So, like, a lot of people might have, like, statements or, like, I love my mum or whatever. And it's a lot of, like, expression of how people physically see themselves. But if our worth isn't in that, then, like, you know, we should be thinking about whether or not it's a good thing to have them if our worth isn't on what we look like. If it's for us, fine. But I think if we're doing it because we want other people to look at us and go, oh, they've got a cool tattoo, maybe that's worth thinking about. All right, alcohol. We're going to speed through because we are late. Actually, let's go speech, because that's pretty quickly. So speech, what was God saying about speech? But I think it's a speech that's building people up. Again, the Romans 14 thing. If we're saying things that's going to offend other people, that's going to upset other people, that's going to, bring other people down, then it's probably not worth saying. So we can have lots of long chats about it then, but we don't have time now. So can we move on to alcohol quickly and to see what the Bible was saying about that? I think a lot of this is a wisdom call, because, Jesus goes to a wedding and is like, this is for celebration. Joy, wine symbolized joy back then at weddings especially. And so, if they ran out of wine, that's a really bad thing. And they would go on for days and days, these wedding celebrations. And so, like, Jesus, God himself, so Jesus creates more wine because he's clearly not condemning it there, because he knows it symbolizes joy, that it's important. But then there's wisdom to be had within that. I mean, that's how I'd see it. Other people see it differently. So other people have different, like with the Romans passage, some people might have different convictions. So somebody I know doesn't drink at all. And so when I'm around her, when I know that we're going out for dinner, I just won't have a drink when I'm around her, because I just know it's not really helpful for her. Or there's other people that I know who used to be alcoholics, and so I know it's definitely, like my dad used to be an alcoholic, and so we don't drink as a family because that's not helpful for him. But for me, I know that I've also made mistakes when it comes to alcohol in my freshers week, and I got way too off my face and made stupid decisions. And I think the Bible tells us about that. So bits in Proverbs and in Galatians, it talks about when it stops being like wine is a joyful thing and a helpful thing, and it becomes my mind is foggy and I'm making bad choices. And so I think it's when you've had enough type thing. Cool. We have run out of time, so I'm just going to do the concluding things. If we want to stay around and chat and your parents are still happy with that afterwards, we'll do that. But and we can chat more over the next few weeks. But as per usual, we've run out of time on a hot topic. So what I think really is that on all these things, God gives us often quite some really clear guidelines. Some of them might be a little more vague, but there's, I think, 2 clear Bible principles on a lot of this stuff. Wrong way around. Again, a nice meme. One is Colossians, doing it, whether we're doing it for the glory of God or not. And also Romans, if we're not causing somebody else to stumble because they have different convictions to us. I think those are 2 quite helpful overall things when it comes to thinking about any of these things and how they practically apply. So, in conclusion, what's our motivation? Why are we doing this? What does God say about our bodies? Well, he personally created our wonderful bodies by hand with value and purpose. And so what should we do? How should we respond? By living thankfully, being present and stewarding our body like a temple as we look forward to bodily redemption in heaven. That's the end. If you want to come and chat with me afterwards, I was going to have a Slido link earlier, but we're already late, and I always get told off for that. Thanks, guys, for listening. That was good.